You're doing this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Five, four, three, two, one.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Loomis with Channel 44. And with me today is Jim Parker, a Republican candidate for Washington County State Senate. Hello, Jim. Thank you for coming.
Hello, Lisa. Thank you for taking the time to interview me today.
Jim is one of 6 candidates running for 3 Washington County Senate seats. He's one of the challengers. Other challengers are Donnie Osmond, a Democrat from Plainfield, and Kim Cheney, a Democrat from Middlesex. The incumbents are Republican Senator Bill Doyle from Montpelier, Phil Scott, a Republican from, I believe he's Montpelier, or is it Barry?
Montpelier.
Montpelier, and Democrat Ann Cummings from Montpelier. So, Jim, tell us about how the electoral process works in Washington County in terms of this election.
How do you get elected? Many people think that it's about running against, one person running against an opponent, but actually it's the top 3 vote getters that get the seats. So historically, and my friend Bill Doyle has been the big vote getter, and for about 38 years. And then the next 2 seats would then be available for anybody that can generate enough votes to get the seat.
Do you have any idea how many votes there are to be had in Washington County?
There's about 36,000, of which we have a certain number of Democrats on one side, a certain number of Republicans, and then there's a large body of independents, about 9,000 to 11,000, as close as we can determine. Yeah.
And do you know, I didn't tell you there would be demographics tests, but roughly how many voters are in the Barry Montpelier? Those are our 2 urban areas in Washington County.
Total voters, I don't know if I can give it to you, but it's about 8,000. Maybe 6,000 in Barrytown, and 8 or 9,000 in the Montpelier, East Montpelier, and then it goes out into Calais and Cabot and Woodbury and so forth. I think the people that actually vote range about 3,000 in Montpelier, about the same number in Barrytown.
And we have probably 2,500 to 3,500 votes, which are actually cast in the 5 towns of the Mad River Valley-ish.
Yes, I think Bill Doyle, in the last election, he was the top vote getter with about 16,000 total votes.
Well, that's pretty impressive. Yeah. So, Jim, why are you running now? Why, after 100 years of living in Vermont, is it time to get into politics?
Well, I've, like everyone else, get an emotional connection with this state and with the valley, and have a business here, actually 3 little businesses. Have raised my children. 2 of them went to university here in the state. And as you know, about 4 years ago, I was concerned about the path Act 60 at that time was taking us in terms of the increase in spending and education, but also primarily the impact on the property tax. So at that time, it was a little bit of a rabble-rouser, I guess you might say. And
I'm just remembering your statewide petition drive. And
the effort was to try to bring attention to what I thought was a dangerous situation. And of course, Act 68 was the result. We still are having problems with that. However, there are many other issues, and I realized that I made some friends in government and the legislature. I realized that maybe there was an opportunity to make a difference, and what better thing to do but to be able to serve your Vermont friends, and in particular Washington County.
And service isn't entirely new. You're a Mad River Valley ambulance, a former driver, or just
a driver, EMTA, for 5 years. And it was a wonderful experience. I mean, we're very fortunate in the valley to have such a competent ambulance service consisting of 3 ambulances and a rescue vehicle. Well managed, well run, and it was great time in my life to be part of that.
And you've never managed to need them in any of your air shows or...
Well, if you go into cardiac arrest here, you're in
if I
good
go
hands.
to cardiac arrest, not going to happen.
No,
So you have the latitude in your life to step away from your 3 businesses. Can you tell me about your businesses and how you can walk away from them for January through March, May, April?
it's called Children Who Are Very Competent.
Uh-huh.
They've come into my business. My son Jim is working in the Vacutherm, which is a business that manufactures machines for drying hardwood lumber. We market the technology here in the valley, and we do some of the assembly and basic manufacturing, but the pressure vessels are made over in Barrie. He's been on board for a little over a year and doing great. The business has never done so well.
Wow,
So
that's great.
me backing away from that's probably been a good thing.
Uh-huh.
My son, Steve, who just graduated from Champlain with a business degree, and I should say Jim went to Quinnipiac and has an international business degree, and he's doing precisely what he was educated to do. He's working in an international business. In fact, presently he's in Quebec installing a couple of machines with an existing customer. Stephen graduated from Champlain with a business degree, and he's working in the water treatment business. And what's interesting about that is, we've always had our children involved in our businesses from the time they were kids, so that they would understand the practical side of life in Vermont. And those 2 guys graduated very well in their classes, but love business. So it's allowing me to step away and concentrate on, first of all, the run is exactly what it is. It's run. You're running all the time for this seat.
It's a good thing you're in such prime physical condition.
Thanks to the aerobic
your
classes,
aerobics
yes.
classes.
However, it's one thing to run, it's another once you're elected. And since you're going to be representing all the citizens of Washington County, not just a few ideas or a few ideologies, I need to be totally clear, schedule clear, so I can focus on that.
Well, let me just back up a minute and go back to your 3 businesses you run. How many employees do you have?
We employ 10
Uh-huh.
in the valley here. Of course, some of my employees work out of their homes, particularly in the water treatment business. We provide vehicles. They take the vehicles home with them, and they're deployed via pager, cell phone, and fax to their calls every day. The lumber drying machine business is more local in terms of the marketing, so we only have a couple of employees there. The water treatment business is the predominant employer.
And you mentioned something to me earlier, which I thought was pretty interesting, that you've shifted your vehicle fleet from gas to diesel. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, well, when the gas dramatic increases in costs came, we were driving vehicles that were getting about 14 miles to the gallon. And we saw a tremendous increase, of course, in our costs, and some of that was passed on to customers, some we absorbed. But I started looking at diesel vehicles, and there's a Mercedes design vehicle that's sold by Dodge called a Sprinter van, and it actually works great for our business. It's easier to work out of, carries more weight, but it has a turbo diesel engine. And in a very short time, we traded those gas guzzlers for the diesel vehicles, and we've saved $600 a month. So we're paying for one vehicle just on the gas fuel savings. Now the prices of fuel are coming down a bit, but there's still a significant
There's no
savings.
reason to get slack.
No, that's right.
No, that's right.
Well, we got we get about 24 to 26 miles a gallon, and it's all over hill and dale, and we're not on flat roads very often.
And those are diesel vehicles?
All diesel. They're turbo diesel, made by Mercedes. They're about $5,000 to $8,000 more per vehicle than the gasoline-powered vehicles.
And how do you where do you get your diesel from?
We buy it. The diesel is readily available at any store, fuel station. However, recently we've started looking at alternate diesel fuel sources known as biodiesel.
French fry fuel?
It can be.
Yeah. So tell me how that works and where you're getting your raw grease and
Well, we're not doing the raw grease thing yet
Mm-hmm.
because we're still in the experimental stages of actually making the biodiesel ourselves. But since you asked, for our viewers, that's biodiesel. It's made from vegetable oil. It's not been through a fryolator. What you see, and I don't know if it's really clear,
Hold it towards maybe both cameras.
maybe that'll work. Well, if you look carefully, you'll see a light golden color on top, and right on the bottom there's a darker substance. That's glycerin. So in the process of making pure biodiesel, 100% biodiesel, you take potassium or sodium hydroxide and methanol, and you create a reaction with the vegetable oil. And the result is that the glycerin drops out. That's the stuff that's called triglycerides, which we don't want in our blood
Or our
vessels,
cars.
or
Right.
our cars.
Yeah.
Now,
So this is vegetable oil,
this
basically.
this is Wesson. It started life as Wesson vegetable oil,
Okay.
which
And
is
you
the most
buy it-
expensive way to do
Yeah,
it.
so do you buy it by the barrel or?
Well, in order to make it practical, you've got to buy either oil that's a second, or you've got to buy oil that's been in a fryolator, but that's a whole different process. I mean, we can get into the technology of it, but this is this is the result of our first process
Chemical reaction, okay.
of making some. So we could learn, because there's a pH balance
Yeah.
that has to be maintained. And then once this goes through the reaction, you have to pass water through it, because when you're using sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, that's essentially lye. And lye is what you use to make soap.
Right.
So in this is a little bit of soap. You can't see it. The glycerin's at the bottom. So we pass water through that, and we drop out the soap. And when you're done, that's what biodiesel, which you can pour in your diesel engine, which will look like. This does not have any petroleum in it. This is totally renewable, and it's made from, in this case, vegetable oil. But you can also take oil out of a fryolator, but the process is more complex if you want to make pure biodiesel. Now, Sugarbush is very concerned. They track, and it may be something you may want to check into at some point, but they track their contribution to the environment on all the fuels they use. They're trying very desperately to reduce emissions. And they use a B20, which is 20% of this and regular diesel fuel. That's a biodiesel mix. This is 100% renewable. There's no petroleum in that. It burns 75% cleaner, and it's only 2% less energy output than regular diesel
You
fuel.
sound like a leftist environmentalist tree hugger.
Well, we won't go there, but
Well, tell
we
me
better
so.
make sure the sign is standing just a little
Not
bit to
leaning
the
to the
right.
left,
We don't want it leaning left too much.
So can you ultimately supply your fleet?
Yes,
You
we
can.
are. That's our plan. I have. I purchased 55-gallon drum of methanol, which will make an awful lot of biodiesel. And now we're working on our source of supply for the vegetable oil. But my plan is to be 100% biodiesel within the next couple of months.
That's pretty exciting. So I guess what you're telling me is that the leftists don't own all the concern about the environment.
You know, I don't think they ever did. But I mean, in a practical sense, it's one thing to care about it, want to stop the use of fossil fuels, but it's another to actually do something. And I like to think of myself as somebody who wants to do something once I understood what the best thing to do was. You know, I mean, there are many good things, all of which we should be looking at to get off petroleum, and wind is one.
Such as wind, okay. What will work in, and I know you're a fan of the market-driven economy, what will work?
I think what will work is something we can produce consistently without getting off petroleum. You know? And I think the thing that will work the most effectively is that, I think, renewable, that can be made from sunflower oil, peanut oil, corn oil. So it's an opportunity for farmers. I suppose there's also an algae. If you want to go that far, there's been some experiments done on an algae that produces a tremendous amount of vegetable oil.
Oh, really?
That you could produce very easily. So I think I like biodiesel because it's a great renewable resource. Only problem is in Vermont we can't purchase a diesel car. In '89 we went on the California emission standards. So unless we can find a way to, and that's something I would like to work on if I get into the legislature, is to allow diesel cars to be made available in Vermont. You can buy a used one with 7,500 miles on it, but it's going to be old technology often. And we want the new, less, lower emitting diesel engines. These Sprinter vans are like that. They're very efficient. And of course, this doesn't pollute nearly like petroleum.
Well, what's going to work on the consumer level? What's going to induce me beyond the spiraling gas prices?
Well, of course, ethanol and biodiesel mix, but since gasoline engines are the predominant fuel consumers out there, we're going to have to certainly find something there. And ethanol is the most practical alternative there at the moment.
What kind of incentives might work for consumers?
Well, I think incentives on, tax incentives on the fuel you're buying, tax incentives on the vehicle you're purchasing, tax incentives maybe even on the registration side. I think all of those
How about just a special line at motor vehicles?
That would be good.
For people who have a diesel,
However, I must say,
a diesel car.
I've never been to motor vehicles where there's a big line, honest to God.
Ah.
So, I mean, I don't know what they're doing there. Maybe they just choose the right day.
Tuesdays? Wednesdays?
It's only, I don't remember the days that they're open, but.
So let's just hop topics for a minute. And do you provide health care for your employees?
Yes, I do. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield. We've switched in the last 2 years to the health savings plan, partly because I pay 100% of their plan for an individual. They pay if they add their family. I found that it was getting so costly to provide the previous plan that I looked at the health savings plan. And what that has done is reduce the cost per individual by a little over $100 a month. Now, of course, there's a large deductible that goes with that. But the portion that you can save is your money, and it's tax deductible, and you can use it as you need for medications and so forth. So to get the plan started for the first year, I contributed to covering their deductible and get their health savings plan going. The other thing we do is, for those that don't participate in the plan because the spouse has a plan with another company, and the person working for me is on that plan, I contribute $37.50 a week to allow them to expand their plan or to contribute to the health savings portion of that. I really think businesses can do this and can participate. I think anything that we can do in the government to make health insurance less costly is very important. We've had somewhat of a health insurance monopoly in the state for many years, and it still continues. Partly because of regulation. We essentially regulated other insurance companies out of the state.
Well, let's talk about you and I have discussed the Catamount Health Plan in the past, and it's one of those instances where, coming from opposite sides of the political spectrum, we found ourselves in complete agreement on what I feel is a single-payer state universal health care system, and what you see is an affordable health care system for businesses and people who can't afford health care. Tell me.
Well, the Catamount system, I received some training, or at least exposure to that, at CVH, and for new candidates. And essentially, for those that might be interested in how that works, is if you are below 300% of the poverty level.
Is that
it's about
$35,000? Okay, $29,000
and some change.
For a family of one?
For an individual.
And
for a family of four, I believe it's around $60,000. You can qualify for Catamount. So and your employer would participate by paying $1 per day, or $365 a year, or they could help pay the monthly cost. But the cost for the plan is, I think, $115 a month. So you have to be at this level in this 300% of poverty level or below for a year, uninsured. And I think I have that right. I could be mistaken. And
so you have to be. I have to leave my current health care program and be without health care for a year in order to qualify?
I believe that's correct. Now,
okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, I think it's because people come and go through. There is a gap. Now, maybe there's a way to cover that, and I could be mistaken about that. So, but principle is to find a way to keep employers involved and keep allow people to have access to affordable insurance. They're estimating it'll be about 30,000 people that will sign on to this program. I raised the question that I was concerned that there might be a cost shift, because if I had employees, my employees earn more than that typically. I'm sure of that. If they were earning in that lower range, or they were an entry-level employee, I would be tempted to say, rather than spending $3,000 a year for their plan, let's go on the...
Well, I think you and I
plan.
talked about this. Could an employer like you, whose employees could you buy in at $2 a day? Could you buy in at $5 a day? Could it be prorated?
I believe it's either or now.
It's either or.
Yeah, I don't believe you can have a little bit of it and a little bit of there.
Well, what do you think about having?
Well, that's what we don't know. Nobody could really answer how much of a cost shift that would be. If they took all of their employees, for instance, that were on Blue Cross Blue Shield, but they qualified, and send them over to the Catamount plan over time, what would that do to... I mean, it's a business decision. If you're
We'd
a
certainly
struggling
get some
business,
economy of scale back into our healthcare system, which we need.
right.
We would end up with a non-competitive situation, which is an anathema to you,
Right.
Because there would be no competition. It would be a state-funded healthcare program.
Well, in a way, you might consider it the
Not
thin edge.
state-funded, state-administered.
Well, it doesn't come free, because the person that's participating in the plan does pay a monthly fee to be in the plan. And then
Beyond the $1 a day?
Correct, oh yes. It's up to about $115 a month, depending on your level of income, I believe it's affecting. So it's not a free plan. It's not single-payer health care, which I feel, with the experience we've had with single-payer education plan, is very hard to keep cost controls in line, and I believe that could be very difficult. I guess someone said that if you think health care is expensive now, wait until you see the cost when it's free.
Well, let's talk about single-payer systems, and we don't want to dance around the issue of education funding. So let's hop right into it. And
well, there are a number of factors that, from my perspective, that's driving up costs. If you listen to the educational professionals and those in the teachers' unions, it's about energy and health care, but then those are factors, no question about it. But to put it in perspective, energy is only 1.73% of the total budget. And what has happened, and health care, by the way, is about 9% of the total budget. So it is a big number, and it has an effect when those costs go up. But it's not what's causing the doubling of cost from 1997, when Act 60 was enacted, till 2005. We've gone from about $628 million to educate about 109,000 children to $1.25 billion to educate 92,700 children. So there's something wrong with that, where you see costs going up and productivity going down. I mean, from a business point of view, that could never be sustained, and I don't think it can be sustained in our education system, and we're going to suffer that. And at that same time, we've added 800 teachers and 3,000 staff. So if you take the number of teachers we have and the number of staff, we're at a 5-to-1 relationship with students.
are you counting the janitors and the chefs?
Everybody, yeah.
Okay. What is it if you count strictly educational professionals who are in the classroom?
Averaging
with the
about
teachers?
10.5-to-1.
And how does that compare to other states?
It's the second or third in the country.
So how much of that is due to our relatively small size and the small number of students? I mean, we cannot have classrooms the size of Chicago.
Of course.
We just don't have the number of students.
And the geography of the state makes it very difficult. You're looking at busing and transportation and so forth.
What portion of the increase in costs that you've cited Do you have any figures on how the cost of administering Act 60 and 68 factors into this double-digit increasing?
Not precise numbers that I would feel would have any credibility at all. But it's, of course, expensive because we have other factors going on. And I think the $1.25 billion we're spending is made up of about $850 million from property tax and $420 million from other revenue sources such as the general fund, the 1 cent on the sales tax is about $60 million, and the lottery and a few other sources of revenue. If you recall, prior to Act 60, we had a plan called the Foundation Plan.
The Foundation Plan never funded for more than 47%? Is that
about $168 million, I think, is about the most that ever went
into it? But the state
that.
never fully funded it.
And where we were, successful communities, you could call them wealthy communities, and those that were wealthy in grand lists and those were not so wealthy, were trying to fund their schools. Some had a much easier time, of course, than others. And the equalization was much needed. It needed to be mandated.
You're telling me you support the Brigham decision?
I don't support exactly the way it was worded, and I've read it, but I support the fact that we needed to fund equalization.
The concept of equal educational
absolutely.
Opportunity for kids.
Because there were communities out there that were really struggling to, and they didn't have the grand list, they didn't have the tax base. However, it's also my opinion that it's not the job of property taxpayers to equalize education, and which is predominantly what has happened.
Then whose job is it?
I think it's everybody's job. It's everybody's responsibility, from broad-based taxes.
Are you advocating for an education income tax?
I don't like income tax because we're already at one of the highest rates in the country. But we've already taken 1 cent from the sales tax. And again, this $420 million that comes from other than the property taxes can go a long way towards equalizing education. If we take the property tax, return it to the communities, all of our communities, and say, fund your own education with your property tax at the level you want to do so. But up to this level of equalization, and you have to determine what that is. Right now, I think it's $7,800 per student. Certainly Warren, Waitsfield, and Faison may have an easier time because of our grand lists of hitting that $7,800. And if we want to throw a few more bucks in there, for whatever reason, to increase, and right now it's $11,000 per student.
So how is that going to be fair to people in Granville whose grand list cannot raise
Well, that's where the equalization,
$11,000?
that's where the $420 million comes in. That
We're going to spread the love around?
Right, spread the love around from everybody. And look at that number. Now, the Brigham decision is going to have to, I had a discussion with a friend of mine, John McClowery of the Ethan Allen Institute, and one of the elements of the Brigham decision was that this grand list, this property value situation needed to be addressed equally across the state. And I think we need to revisit that to allow for equalization with a formula that looks at the grand lists of all the communities, but in fact equalizes based on broad-based taxes and not the property tax. And it would be a lot easier now to get there because we got $420 million to start with than we were when we were $168 million.
What's to keep the state's fingers out of digging into more of that pie?
Well, that is certainly a valid question. I don't know what keeps their fingers out of our property taxes.
Well, nothing anymore.
Right, exactly.
It's all fair game.
Well, the problem is when you put money into a central place, like we have done, and this is where we started our conversation on the single-payer systems. Mm-hmm. You make it an easy target. You build a pile of money, and then all of a sudden we start seeing rises in needs and costs.
So how do you balance that with that economy of scale business model of doing things? There is an economy of scale at some point when you lump all the money and all the expenses through a centralized location. I mean,
that's the
you can
theory.
run 3 businesses out of the facility of one business more efficiently than you can have 3 facilities.
However, that is not effectively what we have. We've got 330 different facilities called our schools.
Our school districts, our schools.
We got 65 school superintendents. You know how many Nevada has?
2?
One.
1? I
So
think Detroit has 1 for more students than we have.
So, I
in
mean,
Vermont.
you know, we've created a very large bureaucracy also in the education system that has a lot of room for paring down. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. But the centralization of the spending, and the argument is that, oh, that's not the way it is. You create your school budget, and that's how you get your money. Well, take a look at Warren, for instance. We served, and one of the reasons I'm running for Senate is that I served on a cost study group in Warren that, because we see our population of our students going from 189 prior to Act 60 in 1987 down to under 130.
So,
And we're, if I may,
Go ahead.
the whole thought here is that with this diminishing of the population, of course, the costs go up because the facilities remain
more
constant.
cost per fewer people, right?
Exactly, and what we discovered is that after going through a 40-page study, 9 months of work, which consisted of, the principal was involved, Andreas Lerner, and Rob Rosen, the school board chairman, Adam Gresham, John Donaldson, and myself. We worked very hard on that. We came to the conclusion that as long as Warren is sending, for every dollar they send to the state, we only get 40 cents back. How can we control costs if that 60 cents is out there in the
Yeah.
universe? And that's what is wrong about the system. We need to be able to raise our funds here, property taxes being important to that, and spend them here so we can really have
Well, sell that to me if I live in Calais.
Well, in Calais, you're not going to be able to do it. I mean, your grand list is going to be much reduced compared to Warren. But also, your school has fewer students in it. It needs to have exactly the same capability from at the level of $7,800, and we have to agree on that
But it
number.
has to have a physical plant which has to meet state and federal mandates, which are frequently unfunded,
Yeah.
have to meet ADA, special needs mandates, which are frequently unfunded.
They're not unfunded. They're underfunded. One of the things about special ed, which is that other third rail that we need to talk about, is the feds did say that they did require, it's a mandate for special ed in schools. It's been a fast-growing part of the education system in terms of cost. But the feds did not say, let it rise as high as you want and open it up to as many folks as you want. We'll just keep sending you the money. They set limits on that, and of course they're going to, presently I think it's at about 60% funded by the feds. But the bottom line is sending this money is going to have some limits to it. The feds just don't leave it open-ended like that. But we have kind of made for whatever reason, and I don't know how that's happened, special ed has become somewhat open-ended in this state.
Well, if the feds are covering 60%, and let's take Warren for example, 60% of each dollar is an unknown for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can control 40% of each dollar, and 60% is unknown. So 40% of 100% of special ed times 60% of unknown, your costs could spiral, and you're a wealthy town.
Well,
An unwealthy town
Well, then,
could be further penalized. But you know what, Jim? Lest anybody accuse you of being a one-trick pony, let's move, if we can, because we're going to run out of time. Let's
Absolutely.
leave education funding, because we could hash this out
Well,
for as many hours as we've already hashed it out
I don't have
ourselves.
all the answers to those questions. That's a very difficult problem, and we need to be fair to all. We don't want
Let me
anybody-
just run a few quick questions by you. Reproductive choice.
Reproductive choice. Well, I like the status quo at the moment. I don't like to see government get involved in people's lives. I'd like to see that limited as much as possible.
Over-the-counter availability of the morning after pill.
How I feel about that isn't going to change anything, of course. And I know that a lot of people suffer, both men and women, because of these issues. And
But I will tell you this, Jim, it is a very critical factor for women in choosing how they cast their ballots,
Right.
is to know personally how their elected officials feel on the subject, whether or not it's a piece of legislation that will come before you next year,
Mhm.
whether it never comes before you.
Well, as I was saying, I believe that women suffer a great deal with this thing, and they make a decision to end a pregnancy, it should be done in a timely way and not way down the road of the pregnancy. So I think there has to be responsibility as well as for the woman making that decision, because ultimately I believe woman suffers whatever decision she makes. If she aborts her pregnancy, down the road somewhere along the line, if we don't give her some help and support, that may come back to haunt her, and I feel bad about that. But I don't believe government needs to get involved in making that decision for women. But support her is a good thing.
Should we educate students about birth control in schools?
Of course.
Should condoms be available in schools to prevent unwanted pregnancies?
That's not a bad idea.
And should the morning after pill, which can prevent conception should unprotected intercourse take place, should that be available over the counter?
I don't think so. I think that that's a big invasion of a woman's body, and it's particularly young women. I think some oversight on that isn't a bad thing with a doctor.
And now, this topic is, we've discussed this amongst ourselves so much we've come around to agreeing, but let's talk about gay marriage, civil unions, who is and isn't in the business of, go ahead. I'm not going to steal your thunder because...
I don't know if I got any thunder there, except that...
Why don't you recount our conversation this summer where we were taking a walk and we realized we concurred?
Well, it's another thing that government's not good at, you know. Determining whether people should be married or not is an issue left best to churches, I think. But in terms of civil unions, I feel that it adequately addresses the opportunity for people of the same sex to have a relationship, to share property, and all of the benefits that can come with that over time.
So who should be in the business of sanctioning weddings?
I think leave that to the churches.
We're going to leave that to the churches and let the government sanction legal unions?
Yeah, I think that's a good place.
See, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
We agree.
Yes.
By accident, we discovered it. Well, I think that's about it, Jim. Unless, I would ask you two more questions, I guess. It's never it. How will you bridge the divide between Republicans and Democrats in the Valley and in Washington County?
Well, certainly with regards to economics, it's always local. So I think the issue of property taxes and how we fund education, we are all in the same boat, and it's taken on some water. So I think Republicans and Democrats can rest assured that that's an issue that I'll be a tiger and very focused on trying to resolve. Whether sitting here I have the answer, I'm sure I don't, because there's a lot of questions still to be understood by me. As far as that gap is likely to be bridged certainly by economics right now. I believe if I do achieve some votes from my Democrat friends, it's going to be because they just can't stand the economics. I don't want them to fear, though, that, or anybody, Republicans or otherwise, that I am far right in any sense of the term. I like to stay pretty much in the middle, and I don't believe we can get anything done in Vermont unless we build consensus. So I don't even harbor those thoughts most of the time. So I think that's how we bridge the gap. You've got to have someone like myself. I think Jim Douglas, our governor, tends to be that way. I mean, he did veto the single-payer health care plan, but I don't believe that was thought out, and I believe that would have been a very expensive tax burden on businesses that we couldn't afford on top of what we have now.
Let's talk about the governor. Where do you concur with this administration, and where do you differ?
I concur pretty consistently with this affordability agenda that you're going to hear a lot about, because affordability goes beyond just being able to afford our homes. It's trying to get incomes up. There's a big spread between our income growth and the cost of living here is dramatic. So young people are leaving. The governor has a plan to try to keep people here. He wants to have the Promise Scholarship Program, which can enable kids to go to universities here, because we know that if they leave the state, it's likely they won't come back because there'll be better economic opportunities there. So his focus, I'm totally in agreement with that. I can't see what else we can do. We have to fix this property tax thing, find a new mechanism to fund education. In the meantime, we've got to cap property taxes. We have got to get a lid on that, at least at the rate of inflation. And I know everybody thinks that, well, what happens if? Well, those things can happen, but of course the supermajority vote in a town would allow more spending on education for an extraordinary situation. So I think we need to do that while we seek this other funding formula. This system of sending our money to Montpelier, the governor, even though he hasn't, I don't want to put words in his mouth because he hasn't expressed this to anybody that I'm aware of, that the central funding of education works, it doesn't work. But
well, and I don't want us to be an advertisement for the Jim Douglas campaign, so tell me where you differ from.
You want to hear how I differ?
Yeah,
well, the only thing I differ, well, let's put it this way, income sensitivity is a big issue. And the governor wants to contract income sensitivity. But for some people, at least in the short term, they're being able to afford their homes because of income sensitivity. And that has been expanded by the legislature. We've taken the lowest income groups that own a home down from 2% of income to 1.8. We've taken the higher income earners up to 85,000 from 75. So more and more people are becoming income sensitized.
So more and more people are income sensitized. More and more towns are gold. We will quickly run out of
gold. And one of the problems also is that this income sensitivity becomes, and I haven't heard anybody say this before, but it is cost desensitization, because these people aren't getting the full impact that the second home owner is, the business owner is, and others that earn above 85,000 are experiencing. And we're just getting, soon to be reassessed in Warren, and it's going to be exciting.
It's a very narrow margin, isn't it? If poverty for a family of 4 is 60,000, and then the $25,000 spread between that and income sensitivity, that's pretty narrow.
Well, it is, and I know we're limited on time here, but take this as an example of how unfair this is. If you live in a house you may have purchased it 30 years ago for $100,000 and it's now worth $400,000, because that's essentially what's happened with the run-up in values. And you are earning $84,999, $1 less than this cliff. You will pay about 2%, 2.5% of your income in property tax. If you earn $85,001, that's exactly $2 more. You'll pay 9% of your income in property tax. I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous situation. How are you wealthy by $2 in order to be able, and it's cash flow. This whole property tax thing is out of people's pockets. It's not magic, it's not funny money, it's not coming from somewhere else, it's out of our pockets, and it's cash flow. And that's why it hurts so much. And the other part of that is that this income sensitivity, its total amount is $154 million.
Of sensitized, non-taxing?
That's $154 million that comes back to the individual who qualifies. It amounts to 27 cents per $100 of value. If you eliminated income sensitivity, you could lower your property taxes right now by 27 cents. The other thing that's going to happen, and I believe is going to be pretty revealing, is that that there are not going to be any more prebate checks.
Right. The government,
checks.
in its wisdom, will just credit your account at your town offices.
Exactly.
What a concept.
Well, what that concept does is effectively lets the government keep about $30 million. The legislature goes into, because it's a matter of time and money. And the other thing is that when you get your property tax bill and you look at it and you see that, you say, well, where's my rebate check? And why is this property tax so high? And you're not realizing that that money has actually been deducted, or you weren't able to use that check to pay your oil bill. So to some extent, I think that is going to be another nail in the coffin of this whole property tax funded system. So
we are out of time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Lisa Loomis from Channel 44, and with me is Jim Parker, a Republican candidate from Warren for Washington County State Senate. Thank you, Jim,
Thank you, Lisa. It's
Always
been
a
great.
pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
and thank you.
Voter suffrage, touching any matter that concerns the state of Vermont.
In Vermont,
You will-
taking the voter's oath is the first step to participating in our democratic tradition. Voting and democracy go hand in hand. Here in Vermont, we have a long history of being involved. Whether in town meeting or in presidential elections, having our say has been the hallmark of being a Vermonter. Today, over 7 out of 10 of Vermont's eligible voters exercise their democratic rights by voting. And now casting your ballot is easier than ever. Yet not everyone feels that they can exercise their right to vote.
Can I only vote on election day? It seems I can never get to the polls when they're open.
You can vote early, anytime 30 days before Election Day, either at your town clerk's office or at home. Just call or stop by your clerk's office to get a ballot.
Sure. And this is your material. This is your ballot. You'll mark it the way you want. Then put it in this envelope, seal it, make sure you fill this out so the ballot will count, and then send it back to us in this envelope.
If you are sick or disabled, a ballot can be brought to your home by 2 justices.
Hey, Mary.
There is even curbside voting. This is when a ballot is brought out to you if you can't manage to get into the polling place because of a disability. In 2006, the federal Help America Vote Act funded the Vote by Phone at the Poll system. This provides an additional option for you to vote at your polling place privately and independently. Be sure to ask your polling officials for Vote by Phone at the polls.
There are so many signs and people, it can be very confusing. How will I know what to do?
There are a lot of signs and people at a polling place on Election Day. The people outside cannot block your way in. They can offer you materials, but you do not have to take them. Once inside the polling place, you'll be asked to state your name.
William T.
Once your name has been found and checked off the master voting list, you will be handed a ballot.
Okay.
Here's your ballot. Please use the pen in the booth to mark it.
Voting is private. You will be shown to a curtained space where you can vote. There are 2 kinds of ballots we use in Vermont, a paper ballot and a ballot that can be counted by a machine. In each case, you must put a mark beside your candidate of choice. You cast your ballot by either folding and placing the paper ballot in the ballot box or by inserting the machine ballot into the voting machine. Detailed instructions on how to cast your ballot will be posted at every polling place. And election workers are always on hand to help if you need it.
What if I make a mistake on my ballot? Can I get help if I need it?
You have the right to ask for assistance, and either 2 election workers will assist you, or you can ask the person of your choice. If you make a mistake on your ballot, you may request another one.
Thank you.
What if I can't remember the name of the candidates who I want to vote for?
You can bring a list of the people you wish to vote for or their brochures into the voting booth. But remember to take those materials when you are done. You are also entitled to bring a person of your choice into the voting booth to help you. If you need, you may also bring a magnifying glass or other aids along to assist you.
Can I write in names and not vote for some of the candidates on the ballot?
You can write in and vote for candidates for any office you wish. You do not have to vote for every office on a ballot. The votes for the candidates that you do choose will still be counted.
What if I get to the polls and my name's not on the voter checklist?
Scott is the first name?
Yes, sir.
We don't seem to have you registered.
If you find your name is not on the voter checklist, ask to speak to the town clerk or presiding officer. Explain how and when you registered to vote. If you registered in time, you will be asked to swear or affirm in writing that you registered in time and are qualified to vote. The clerk or presiding officer will then add your name to the checklist and you can vote.
You are all set. Perfect. Let's add him to the checklist.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This procedure takes only a few minutes to complete. If for any reason they do not agree to add your name to the checklist, you may still cast a provisional ballot for federal races. Later, you can check with the Secretary of State's office to see if your provisional ballot was counted.
What if I believe I'm being prevented from exercising my right to vote?
There's a notice posted in clear view in every Vermont polling place with the phone number of the Secretary of State's office. Call this 800 number if you believe an election official has prevented you from exercising your right to vote, and someone will assist you. Remember, before you can vote, you must register and take the voter's oath. The many places you can do this are your town clerk's office, the Department of Motor Vehicles and other state offices, with a mailed-in driver's license renewal, and at county fairs and other public events. Just fill out the form and sign your name. It's that easy. Remember, though, it's important to register only in the town where you actually live. To learn more about voting in Vermont, visit the Secretary of State's website at www.govotevermont.com or call 1-800-439-VOTE. It's every citizen's right to vote. Why don't you?